So basically, we thought when we organised the conference that it'd be nice to have a few panel sessions where we get a chance to talk about some of the things we talked about today. And one of the themes today seems to be emotion. We've had Dr. Camara's keynote talk. Lola's keynote talk. We've had Carl talking about emotions and long-term memory. And tomorrow there's Chris talking about the emotion model. Myself and Mike talking about our emotional framework. So it seems to be a thing there. So it felt like it was worth discussing in a bit more detail and see what you guys thought. So we thought we'd have a ragtag panel of reprobates and other people. So okay, you know who Lola is. You know, I have Alexander from Aldebaran. Have Carl as the token grumpy curmudgeon who Christy is an emotional developer, and Mike is also something interesting about emotions, and me is just a random person. So that's enough from me, so I will pass the microphone down the panel, and see if anyone wants to make some opening remarks, and then we'll just get going with general questions and discussion.
Okay, so try and keep this quite short from me. There's obviously vast bodies of emotional research for human psychology and also for robot psychology. Lola's got some fantastic papers, and we had a fantastic talk from her this morning. Angelica Lim, who's now working for Aldebaran, Dr. Cynthia Brazil, who does a lot of interesting work at MIT, and a lot of other researchers, and some really fascinating bodies of work. I wanted to tell a couple of short personal stories that I think are quite contradictory and ask a lot of questions of me. First one is my mum. She's someone who hates technology, but yet I've walked into a room where Miss Calf, my robot, is, and she's down on her hands and knees talking to the robot, kissing the robot and interacting with the robot when he's turned off. What's going on there for someone who hates technology? The other story was my grandmother. She lived till she was about 97. I remember saying to her when she was about 95, "Why don't you go out and make new friends and meet new people?" And she said to me, "I've lived through 3 generations of friends, meeting them, being friends with them, and then dying. I can't deal with any more emotional loss or pain in my life." So what sort of emotional connection, what sort of feeling does that person need in a robot? And then there's a lot of tech investment at the moment. There's a lot of people want to put money into hardware, into robots. So the clock's kind of ticking. It's great to do the research, it's great to do all the thinking, but equally, I think we need to be asking ourselves, how much feeling, how much emotion does the robot really need before we actually can get it doing something useful?
Yeah, I think those are very good remarks. And the one thing that you said that I think is quite important is the fact that we try to communicate with robots and with each other on an emotional level. There's a lot of information that we communicate between each other, body language and so on, which we're not necessarily aware of. And I think that is what is missing with the robot. It's like when you talk with your robot and it's turned off. It's a one-way communication. You want something to come back from it. At the same time, if you do it wrong, then it will be awkward. So there needs to be that natural level of communication between you and your robot. There's a lot of people worrying about if you have an emotional robot, what would stop it from becoming the Terminator? I don't think that's something worth worrying about. I think in the end, we get to decide what the robots want and what they don't want. I think that is what is important though. What do we teach the robots to like and not like? Well,
Dave has referred to me as the grumpy curmudgeon for this panel on a couple of occasions. The reason for this is that I am always the voice that turns around and says, "I'm not sure I want my robot to have emotions." I think we've got to be very careful about how we define what we mean by that term. Do we mean we actually want the robot to simulate an emotion? Do we mean that we want it to understand our emotions and then just behave in a particular way? Or are we really striving to build a complete emotional subsystem that's there to support a higher level of functionality within the robot. There have been a couple of occasions when I've spoken to people, and in my usual slightly light-hearted way, I've turned around and said, do you want your self-driving car to get road rage? Yeah? Do you want your robot butler to wake up in a grumpy mood in the morning and burn your breakfast? Yeah? And of course a lot of people answer as Christy just said, and say, well, we don't have to worry about the Terminator aspect because we'll decide what we let them strive towards. So are we actually saying that we only want robots to have happy emotions? So are we kind of building the Prozac robot to service the Prozac generation? So I have a lot of concerns about whether we should do it, and if we do it, how we should implement it.
Thank you. So I see all of us are thinking along the same lines and asking the same questions. So I'm actually not totally concerned either by, this will overdo and robots will take over the world and etc. etc. I think people working in this area we are all very aware that there's only so far we can go, and we are very aware of the ethical issues as well. 1997 book by Rosalind Picard, Affective Computing, already took into consideration all these issues. But how far should we go modeling emotions? I think it depends on what we want them for and which aspects of them we want to model. What's our goal? Whether it is to help understand human emotions, maybe to work with neuroscientists or psychologists to try and figure out what mechanisms might be underlying something. If it is to interact with a specific type of people, with a specific sector of the population, children for this purpose, etc. So we cannot, it would not be possible, but it would not be right, I think, to try and just model the full variety of human emotions. We don't understand them to begin with. But okay, so the title of the panel was feelings, about feelings, and we're talking about emotions. And usually, they're slightly different things. Feelings is usually defined as the subjective aspects or the awareness of the emotions. And that's something that I really think we're not ready for because we don't understand how feelings happen in us and humans. So that is a big challenge for us. Now, do we need to model that? I think it would be very good to try and understand human feelings, which is a topic that neuroscientists are really striving with. So how do we go from all this? We have these hormones running around, and we can sense changes in us. How do we go from there to this subjective feeling of terror, happiness, etc.? And there's lots of things we will need the robots to have. Lots of internal representations, many more different types of sensors, internal sensors to sense internal states. So it would be very interesting to take tiny little steps on that path. I think we're very far still, but it would be, I think, very interesting research that we would have to do very carefully as well for ethical reasons.
Well, if Carl is playing the grumpy man, I will try to play the simple man. So perhaps we have the luck to have a robot that exists in real, and perhaps to continue your story, we could begin simple by not to thinking about a complex algorithm to modelize, like you said, a lot of feelings. Perhaps you could begin by having a shutdown robot and testing on people, and the other week we will shut it down, but with very limited reaction, and perhaps we will try to add just simple by simple some little breaks, and at some moment we should stop and say, okay, it's enough to have feelings to have a nice interaction, like you said, with your cats. I don't understand the 7 feelings of my cat. I just want to say he's happy or not, just to ameliorate my way to interact with him. And it's so perhaps let's begin simple, and we will see what emerge of test, but simple, but with a lot of testing on real human and real target, like you said. It's my vision.
So, with those statements, does anyone else want to ask a question or to make a statement?
I got a question, which is more generally, I'm a bit worried also that by the idea we want the robots to simulate or to mimic emotions, because there's something about the way we build emotion is about how we deal with suffering, how we deal, and we can't disconnect, disconnect sounds or disconnect the whole emotion process. So how do you work with that? So it's a large question, but how do you make things that actually are not disconnecting from the whole process that's behind the emotions?
Who wants to have a go to that?
It's really difficult. If I understood your question correctly, I think we actually cannot do it. We cannot disconnect because even, I've seen what we call naive users of robots who have no idea how they work. They come to a lab often and we give demos, and the robot is just beeping, and it sounds like it's distressed, or very, very simple cues to which we seem to be unable not to respond to. So immediately, as long as a human is involved, we cannot disconnect. We just respond to that. But what is interesting for us is trying to understand why or which aspects of that signal trigger something. But yeah, I think we cannot really do without. But even us, we know exactly what's going on inside a robot, and when we start interacting with them, we have pretty much the same responses.
I think there's one piece that, just to add on to this, we as a species are very good at taking everyday things and anthropomorphizing them and adding human characteristics to inanimate objects. Not being funny, as your dear mother did when she knelt down and was chatting to you on NAO. We do that, and of course, with NAO, we're dragged into that even more. It's deliberately been designed to make us do that. Yeah. So I do think that we have to bear in mind that it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a car, a telephone, or anything else. We see something and we try and apply a set of characteristics to it that we can equate to. So I do think that as you say, we're already there in a way, because we already apply a lot of those characteristics to it.
Yeah, as I said, there's a quote by a guy called Paul Ekman who's done sort of research into emotions and recognizing emotions, and his statement, which I wish I could remember, I can't. It's basically along the lines that you can't have neutrality isn't an option. You can look at your fridge, and you won't necessarily think your fridge's emotions, but as soon as you start doing things that look more human, then you will start ascribing emotions to them. And I think as Lola and Carl saying, we just can't get away from that. So the question is, okay, given we know that, how do we make this thing react so that we don't think it's an angry robot, but we think it's when it's not. We might think, okay, the robot's actually neutral. This is not an emotional application, but people won't perceive it like that. They'll think, okay, that robot doesn't care about me. So what does that imply about how we build applications for robots?
Let's say from now 5 years ahead, when you straighten out the percentage that is not right, like voice recognition, face recognition, and let's say that it will be more affordable, how do you think it will interact in the daily life?
Robots or?
Yeah, I mean, as a person that really knows the limitation and has played with it quite a lot, do you really think it's going to be a partner, a friend, a pal, like a brother to your children or something? Or it's going to be an appliance, whatever you do with it?
I think I found a button.
I think just before we get to that point, he's feeling it.
No.
No. Oh yeah, there he is. Right, Phil, who's sitting back there, happens to say, have you seen the big seals?
Big six.
Yeah, they're a big, fluffy seal.
Oh,
Parrots, thank you. Phil is involved in selling those in the UK, and it's quite amazing that for a bit of fluffy fur, and it doesn't do very much.
Yeah, I think I
And it's surprisingly expensive.
And it has
it's more expensive than that. It has an incredible effect on people who are suffering things like Alzheimer's and dementia. So when you say, will it just be an appliance? That is just an appliance, but people don't react to it like that. So I don't think you can just draw a line and go, that's an appliance or it's a friend. You know, this seal isn't a friend, but people don't treat it like just an appliance. They definitely imbibe it with feelings from their point of view. And I believe that that's really the question that we're talking about here, is how not just whether the robot's got emotions, but how we apply that and how the assumptions we make about it stuff. So I don't think you can draw the line and go, will it just be an appliance or will it be a companion? There's such a myriad of ranges across it.
But this seal is quite primitive in his reaction, so your brain is tending to fill up the gap. While now it looks very human, and you expect more from him than from a seal.
But your brain still fills up.
Yeah, but
Obviously it still fills up, but
I think you should just imagine it like between a dog and a monkey. No, a monkey is like a human, but you won't speak with him. Or you can speak, but he won't answer. So if it's like a new animal, and there will have people that like cat, dog, monkey, and I think more something like that than as a brother for your child.
I think there's an opportunity as well. Looking at a lot of parents, they'll put their children down in front of the TV and leave them for a few hours, as much because the parents want a break. And that's now kind of become giving your kids the iPad or your mobile phone so they can play with that. So actually, as developers and as roboticists, there's an opportunity for us to move that level of care on from sort of almost dumb interaction of the children being fed information to actually creating games or things which can engage them and educate them. So there's actually questions we should be asking ourselves. It can be an appliance if you want, but what can we do to make that help?
Yeah, that's true that in case of educating kids, I've seen friends that have the Roomba or clone of Roomba, and before leaving the house, they said, "Oh, don't forget to remove your shoes of the middle of the piece of the room, else the Roomba won't step on it." So it educates. I think it's a good one. It will help child to have a small mission to say, "Oh, I shouldn't forget to plug it when I'm leaving, or to clean it, or to prevent it from falling from the table." It's like, again, that's a small cat. So, like people buy small cats before having a new kid in the family to educate the big brothers. So I think it's something you should care of, and so it's not like a game, like you said. It's more something to care. So it's another type of But you say it better than me. But I agree. I mean, I think
I'm
what
going
you
to
said.
having pizza now.
One of the things
There
you
was
say
a person over there who's been trying for quite a
This
while.
is not really inevitable because actually the entertainment industry is actually doing it. So you can just get a virtual girlfriend with an open clip and it's virtual girlfriend and they behave with human emotions and they are actually there. And the Tamagotchis, they are very old technology, but they were trying to simulate emotions for people just to care about the actual physical thing. So it's just like the interface is not there yet. The robotics are not human enough, but the simulation is there. So right now, I see it on the industry all the time. Like a video game, the characters behave really human, and they have human emotions, and you can just go and just play Skyrim, and the characters are very human. So there is a business need, and they are gonna demand it. Like we have these very big models that work and already we know it work because people play these video games and they have wives in the video game. So they are just gonna demand it. And so I think it's inevitable. At some point someone is gonna tell me, hey, you want to develop this, just do it. So
I agree. I think it's inevitable, and I think the thing is that people will feel something anyway. And I guess that in the case of games, it's limited in scope. So I tend to disagree that it's already done in simulation. The only difference is making it into a physical robot. I don't think that's true. I think perhaps things work in the limited scope of the game. But I'm not sure I could play that. It's a matter of case, okay, if only you could plug the thing into a life-size robot, it'd be done. I disagree with that.
I think. Sorry, I just want to bring up an interesting thought, which is more of a response to an earlier point. But aren't we, to some extent, treating each other as appliances at some point as well? I mean, if you go to if you go to work, you are an appliance. If you go home and you have a companion, then you are something more emotional. But I think we all definitely operate on some sort of scale where at some point we are an emotional being and at other points we are just an appliance. And I think it's the same with robots. At some points you will say, robot, find me the answer to this question. And at other points you'll say, well, you're a good friend, let's go out. Okay, have some fun, watch a movie.
So you mean you're not the same person at the work and in your house?
Or maybe you are both.
Yeah, I think in a sense that's true of children. And part of that, when your children grow up and you're trying to show them how to behave, part of that is teaching you, okay, there are times when it's really important to just do what I say. It's a dangerous situation. Yeah, now is not the time to be really emotional and mess about. And there's boundaries, I guess is what I'm saying. And the context depends on how you can act and what's permissible. And I think that's sort of what Christie's saying, that in one context you behave in a certain emotional range.
Exactly.
To me it's more the roles we play actually, so we are the same person, but if I'm at that stage, if I'm lecturing, so I'm playing the role of a lecturer, there is certain context that I sort of follow. And if at home I'm the sister of, my sister, but at the same time I'm daughter of my mom, so all these different roles define in a way how we behave, and that includes also the emotionality as well. Because if I'm at a meeting, of course, I'm expected to be less emotional and not cry unless something whatever happens. So I think the role in a way defines it. So, we can have one robot, but it could have different roles depending on the situation. So if it's a butler, this is one example, but if it's a student or an instructor, tutor, would be a different role, should be more serious and so on. To me, in a way, I would say there are a lot of links between roles and emotionality or behavior in general.
Yes, I tend to agree because on last NAO project, for instance, we came into the same, the robot is not as lively or as interactive as he can be when he's launching his normal autonomous flight, for instance, but that's because he has a role, is helping the teacher for the kids in special education. So he has to pass this through. So that's not the robot. Is not. It's the same robot, but indeed he has a job or a role.
I have a question which is not going to sound very good. Suppose we overcome all the computational and performance issues and we get to the point where we have very capable machines. Why do they need to have emotions? Isn't our primary intellectual ability the ability to control our emotions and be rational and well behaved?
Okay, sorry.
I think we're about to have one to say.
Okay, who's seen Star Trek? So anyone did. I think one of the defining things about most of the Star Trek variants is there's the Vulcan equivalent. It might not be a Vulcan, it might be Data. And one of the funny things about that is to play on the thing that notionally doesn't have emotions, doesn't understand emotions, and how that interacts with the rest of the crew. And I think the fact that that's considered to be amusing or funny shows that if the robot didn't have emotions, I think it would get old.
I think you can compare emotion with statistics. I mean, because in the movie I Robot, when the guy was saving Will Smith instead of the girl, he was talking about the statistics that he may have more chance to survive than the girl and stuff like that. I think if we map 300 ways to say hello, 300 ways to do single things that we do every single day, it will be pretty much like us, because we are doing the same. When I say hello to you, I can say hello to you in 3-4 different type of moods. That's it. So, but first of all, we have to understand why we are doing this, why we need to put emotion into robots. I had the chance to talk with this guy, which is Professor Tomotaka, which is, I don't know if you've seen the Robbie robots or all the other robots he made. The super, very well designed robots. And he wasn't talking about emotion at all. He was saying that this robot could be our companion in a way that, for example, we are not using Siri anymore because we feel stupid talking to a brick. But if you have a small robot like this, if you have in your pockets and you talk with him, it will be less stupid than talking with a brick. And so he was foreseeing the usage of robots also in other way, like he was designing robots to do just one thing. Like he designed a robot for a Duracell that was climbing a rope or something. And I think he has a really clear vision of what he wants to do, and now he's achieving that. So I think we should do the same. So, because for example, while we are developing all these emotional models, what's for? To let the robot interact better with us, or to have a companion? Why we cannot get a real person doing that? Some people are asking me, why you need a robot butler or a robot, cleaning lady when you can get a real one?
Just for amusement.
Yeah.
I mean, people like to be amused. It's just like you don't really expect this thing to actually behave like a human, and then the moment it does, it just for people it's profit, and then for other people it's entertaining. So it's just for the amuse of the people. It's not like we are looking at the technical aspect of it, but what happened is there is demand at the end. People just want it, and some people don't even understand what's going on. So my uncle doesn't know anything about technology, but Tamagotchi is really for it. It's really amusing. So it's like, oh, look at that thing, and it behaves like a human, and then it's amusing. So you just spend money. So in some way, there is some demand of the human emotions into
all those questions when we do this research. But okay, if you think that having two ways to say the same thing is better than one, because it's more like us, then having 3 ways of saying, of showing happiness is better. Having 300 is better because it's more like us. Having 3,000 is better. having 3 million is better. At some point, you have to weigh too many, and you need a mechanism to choose the right way to say that, to express happiness in a particular specific context with a specific person, what we normally call doing the right thing at the right time. And emotions are a key mechanism for that, shortcuts to make that sort of decisions really quickly. So it is very useful for us. It might be useful for robots, because robots can also have too many solutions to provide, information overload. So emotions can play the same role as they're playing us, for example, just an example. And sometimes simpler is better. So having the same repetitive behavior again and again is not very good, but having too much variety is bad as well. It can be bad because it's, it might take way too long to choose the answer. Now, if someone doesn't perceive the need for an appliance or a companion to be emotional, then he shouldn't have it. He should get just an emotionless, tool. Many people have probably most people just have the expectation that as soon as you are interacting with something that is a bit, in the social domain, immediately you are going to start attributing emotions to it, because that's the way we are, and we can't help it. So it's generally welcome, to have some set of responses, but some people prefer not to have them. And just have an appliance as an appliance, and that's perfectly fine. It can be actually good for, as we've seen in the case of autistic people. Some people just prefer to have this whole emotionless companion and just talk to it. Having some level of emotion, very simple, can also be good to help these people learn how to behave in a human society, which is very difficult for them. So robots without emotions can be good for them, but robots with a little bit of emotion can be good for them to learn things that are very complex for them in a simple way. But yeah, if someone prefers to have a robot that has no emotions whatsoever, absolutely fine.
Yeah, that's what people likes to be surprised. Like you said, we like entertaining. So to be surprised that they need to have different response to the same action. You don't want the robot to say every time he says someone, hello man, hello man, hello man, all day long. And the other side, other stuff people want is to feel emotions, to feel alive. And so again, the robot has to pick the right sentence at the right moment, so they feel understood and they feel something. So at first I could say yes, that if the robot has no failure, it could be emotionless. But for entertaining, it's better to have some.
While we've just been sitting here and we've all been talking about brains make funny connections, and I suddenly thought of the Geminoid robots. Has anybody seen those? Yeah, they're the incredibly lifelike ones, where, one of them, I can't remember the professor's name, but it's an exact replica of it. Thank you. And it is quite amazing. I don't know if it's still on YouTube. There was a video clip of him being interviewed, and the start of the interview is him and his robot sitting on the sofa.
Yeah, the scary one.
And as the camera sort of goes round as they start the interview, you really can't work out which one's the robot and which one's the person. And I'm sure you've all heard the term uncanny valley. Yeah. But I'm wondering, are we going to get to a point, and this really is a genuine question, is it possible that we could get to a point where we could make the emotions that are represented in our robots cause the same reaction? We end up in an emotional uncanny valley. I really don't know whether it could or would happen, but it's certainly going to be intriguing to see if we get to the point where that little box appliance, for want of a better word, he's actually expressing emotions too well, and he's too like us, and it makes us feel uncomfortable the way that a robot that is too physically like us can make us feel.
I think that the third motivation, specifically for men, is to have the fantasy to create life. That's why it's more men. And so, to create life, you want something that reflects emotion, like he's living, like he has a living by himself.
There's ethical questions as well, I think, about how robot emotions might be abused. We've got Kim, who's looking into, who's got a background in online marketing. How will that start to, if we're using a robot for marketing into our physical space, how could that be abused by manipulating our robot's feelings, or the kind of work you're doing with KPMG, big companies, and how might they want to manipulate you? Or now he's feeling sad today. Yeah. All you need to do is buy product X. What are the implications of that? I mean, you must be talking about that. You must be thinking about that.
A large companies are already doing that.
Yeah,
they're manipulating us.
I would say anyone who has children has already been having this experience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite efficient with children, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'd also like to propose an answer to why we want our robots to have emotion. And I think, I suppose everyone's heard of Maslow's pyramid, which is our primary needs. And one of them is to feel like you're belonging, to have a place to fit in, to feel safe. And I think the way that we relate to each other is quite important. I think the thing that makes our friends more important than just strangers on the street is the fact that we understand them, we know how they're going to behave, we're familiar with them, we trust them, and we also usually see some sort of empathy in them, which means if I hurt, they hurt. So they don't want me to get hurt, so I feel safe with them. And I think that is what we are trying to get out of robots as well, a level of trust.
What if the robots don't want the other robots to get hurt?
That's an interesting one. I suppose it depends whether you would program your robot to have empathy for other robots.
Yeah, but that's what an emotional framework would imply.
Yes, it is certainly an interesting question.
I don't think we should program them. We should find a way to let them learn by themselves or share the knowledge.
But you can only learn if you can describe the problem that needs to be solved. The reason why we are emotional is because we evolved it over thousands of years, because those who had emotions survived and those who didn't died. So the question is, why would a robot need emotions? Technically, they don't need emotions to survive.
I don't know.
I was thinking something that hasn't been mentioned is autonomy, and there's a lot of, as we use robots more and more, we're thinking about extraterrestrial exploration, deep sea exploration. These robots have to be able to survive, on their own. So if they need power, for example, if it's an extraterrestrial robot, if it needs its solar panels to be in light, it has to have certain behaviours that will allow it to get recharged. And you can see that need for power and the different types of behaviour that come about through that as being the sort of underlying reason for basic emotions. So someone was talking about the robot in the museum, and it had to be autonomous to work the 8 hour, because now a museum has to work 8 hour days, but it has a 2 hour battery life or whatever it is. So at some point it has to maybe do less motor action, and that's like it's tired. That's like a feeling in the broadest sense, this different way of behaving because of its different needs, because of its the need for autonomy, the need for it to maintain itself.
I think it's about priorities as well. I think what we need to do is look at beehives, for instance. Bees don't care about themselves. They will sting a predator even if it kills them to protect the queen. That's highly irrational, but it's because they care more about the hive than they care about themselves. And I think this should be the same for our exploration robots. They the primary concern should be the mission, not their individuality.
I absolutely. I mean, how we prioritise this is down to us as
So in the end, it's what we program into them.
Yes. I mean, robot emotions don't have to be the same as human emotions.
Yes.
Their priorities and their sources of pleasure, if you like, are down to us.
Yes, exactly.
I think what you're maybe suggesting is there's an analogy between humans and robots, and at the end of the day, arguably, we're just a series of chemical reactions. And for that robot, they're just a series of programming steps, and it's only us that wants to. We've got delusions of grandeur, perhaps, and saying we've got emotions, but actually it's just a chemical reaction.
Well, maybe what I'm saying is that emotions are one solution to a set of problems that evolution has come up with, and maybe we can look at that and take the principles from that and use it as a solution to our engineering problems.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Alexa?
Yeah, I think there's another reason why we need emotion in robot is that it can be a key in how we are using technology. If you have emotion, you have a connection. So if you think about all the bricks that you have, the fridge, the television, the thermostat, or your web service, your mails, or whatever, the stock market, you don't have any connection with it. And if you don't have the connection, maybe you will use it for a while, and then after you get tired of it. So, but if your robot can be an entry door to this different technology, and it can do it with an emotion behind, it will connect you to this technology. And so you will reuse them, you will continue to use them.
So it's his way to survive?
Yes.
If you only wanted to be amused, you could use a random mechanism to choose any emotion and that's it. So what is the difference between having a complex emotional structure and just choosing an animation to be amused and that's it?
Sadly, there's not a lot of difference.
Like preservation of values, of the values of the robot itself.
Yeah, but that's true that a random generator is not far from the best we can have. Because in fact the intelligence is in you. You project, you say, today is unhappy. Oh yes, it's because yesterday I was not fair with my mommy.
You'll feel it out for yourself.
I think there's definitely a certain amount of that. You're definitely projecting things onto the robot. But I just remember this conference last year. There's the guy from Plymouth, I think, or Southampton, and they were doing these sort of experiments with children. They're talking to the robots. I forget the exact aim, but part of it involved basically having a dialogue between the children and the robot. And they had these 5-minute video clips, and it's really good. The child was talking to the robot. Oh, now you're so beautiful, you're so clever. I love you now. And it's even, oh wow, this is really working really well. And at the conference dinner, I was talking to this guy. He said, well, actually, we only show 5 minutes because after a while, after about 5 minutes, the children realise that the robot isn't really reacting to them. Yeah, it's partly luck. It's partly the program doesn't always work right. And as soon as the children realise that the robot isn't really understanding them, they lose interest. It's almost like a binary operation, like, don't care anymore. So I think that is why randomness isn't going to work. People will figure it out. It's not really reacting to me, I don't care. It's trust. Yeah.
But Carl was saying something different this morning when he said about the application you need when you say that yes, those.
Yeah, but you're dealing with a different group of children there. You're dealing with a group of children who are already challenged on their ability to communicate, and you're taking very small steps to try and draw them out of the situation they're in and towards the situation we're in. You get to a point where those children, just as Dave's describing, will go, well, it doesn't matter whether I tell him a story, he still makes the same noises. Yeah? It's that understanding, it's that development of their communication skill. So, let's not confuse two issues here. When we're helping special needs and special education children, we have a different set of criteria to when we're talking about general interaction. Just as Celine was saying, we deliberately mute the way that the robot responds and reacts when it's in a teaching environment, because, as we were saying about roles, it has a role as a tool to do a specific job. Yeah. So I just don't confuse the two too much. Yeah.
Michael's leaving me waiting patiently.
But it's exactly the same thing. I think topic now I'm working for Aldebaran. I think Aldebaran has got a good suggestion there. A good proposal of the two different types of roles is quite extreme as it is now, because we've got a very autonomous life where the robot is open to work with emotions to take very decisions amongst a large choice of them in an open environment where it's got to interact with people. But on the other hand, when we need him to do something and stop thinking for himself, we can close that autonomy and get him to work as a slave. And there we do not need any emotions. And that's what NAO is doing.
So you have something to say?
I forgot.
Just
No, yes.
Just to complete on that, is that it would be interesting to explore a ratio of autonomy that is sufficient, because to make it interesting to a kid that is developing, okay, you're maybe in the middle of a game where you're having questions and answers or some interaction, but when the kid is losing interest, it's also up to the robot to pick it up and say, well, do you want to stop the game? Should we try something else? If the robot doesn't do that and doesn't increase the autonomy when it's required, it becomes boring.
It's also the question of, we are speaking about different things, about emotions and mimicking emotions. We are kind of mixing the two. So, are we asking if it's good or why the robot should mimic or imitate emotions, like act as if, or really feeling them?
I see no difference.
So you don't see any difference?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I guess then the question is everybody sitting in this room?
Yeah.
Are they actually feeling the emotions that I sense, or are they just mimicking them to me?
So how do you know that the other person isn't as on?
Yeah, how do you know?
Yeah. I mean, for all I know, Carl's an automaton, and he's got programs of emotions. I don't know that he's conscious. I only go when he it's like,
But no, that's quite right. We make an assumption that because we experience something in a particular way, everybody experiences it in the same way. I have no frame of reference as to whether that's true or not.
Usually not to have actually.
We take it for granted.
Yeah.
Now, I think, come back a little bit to the randomness issue, and also to the two-way emotional communication. For sure, I would like the robot to at least understand some of my emotions, because then he could act in a certain way, which is okay. On the other hand, I'm not sure I would like him to have too much emotion. Take an example, security robot, right? A burglar comes in the house. I don't want the robot running and hiding behind furniture because he's afraid, So, you must be a little bit careful about that, okay, not only for this case. Now, regarding randomness or mimicking, there is a context. So, it is sure, if you take pure randomness, this does not work because it becomes incoherent. And we immediately see that, or even the kids, after a little surprise, will see it very quickly. But if you are in context, then the question is how rich we have a way to present emotion with a lot of parameters we are even not aware of. Our brain sees a lot of signals, but it's not conscious, right? We see the overall picture. We're conscious about the overall picture, not about the thousands of details. Now, if you take a NAO, he can have 3, 4, 5 signals to combine a kind of emotion, right? So, it's not many. Which means that if you are in context with some randomness about those signals, you could very well mimic, and we're talking mimicking because I don't know what it is really feeling for a robot, so mimicking in a way that's understandable for a human. So not totally random, but a certain randomness could be really enough, I think.
I mean, there's some interesting work done by Angelica Lim, Petit on the forum, is that she's looked sort of cross-modal emotions. So can you take something about the way someone speaks and then apply it to how something moves? And that's really interesting because it seems you can take something about the way the changes in variance in speech patterns, and you can make the robot move in the same way, and people perceive the same emotion. That's right. And that's kind of interesting because it implies actually that the modality doesn't actually have to be that rich. I think it goes back to the work you talked about in the rhythm.
Yeah. Sorry, I actually have a question. So do you think humans understand the emotions of other humans that well? Because I'm not so sure.
It's not guaranteed that's the case. So this is why.
I think we all have the experience of being, in puzzlement about something or whatever, and someone else's. Or can see so clear you're disgusted about that.
No, they just go in different cultures.
The same culture,
culture is a signal. If you don't know it, you understand it the other way because in your culture means something.
Yeah, but even in your culture, I mean, it's just in everyday life. People think they can read your face. No way. Sometimes, occasionally, you express an emotion very clearly, but it's mostly not the case, and we just assume that people are like us, they think like us, and feel like us.
I have an interesting story.
I think on one hand, the human brain is capable to recognize patterns. So that's any different type of signals, whether it is an image, a sound, or emotions. I think it's the similar type of thing we're looking at. So it's designed for that. And to back you up on the randomness, as we got cues to recognize images, faces, sounds, or whatever pattern, and map it in our brain, adding a slightly bit of randomness is adding our ability at matching, at recognizing things that we think we know, so much them together. So perhaps, if we can recognize two emotions, adding a bit of randomness could make it even more realistic to us.
And sometimes you can have a very rich end combination. I'll take an example. You have a small speech, right, which lasts, let's say, 2 minutes. And in this speech, as you were saying, let's say that you have contextually, for certain words, 10 patterns that you can use. And now imagine you have 10 times, so at random. After 30 seconds for another type of word, another 10, and another 10. There are not many. But the combination over the minute of 3 times 10 random start becoming very rich expression. So
it just reminded me of a funny story. I don't know how many of you are aquarium enthusiasts, but one of the species that I quite like are cichlids. And you get this funny thing where cichlids from one part of the world speak a different language than the cichlids from another part. In one area, they want to show their dominance, they go light. And in another area, they go dark. So what happens if you throw these two fish together, the one becomes very aggressive and the other one wants to say, okay, I can see you're aggressive, I'm not going to take you on. But of course, they both do the same thing and they get confused. And the one thinks, I'm actually much bigger than you, why are you showing your aggression to me? And so yes, it depends a lot on your environment and the people that you grow up with, certainly.
And when we speak of random, it's not a random changing every minute. I think it's just a random evoluting on days, and with some things to put a boost in some direction, like you tell the robot, okay, you remove 30% of the current randomness in happiness or something. But the whole evolution could be totally based on you connect to a meteor website and you take, oh, it's raining, I will lose 1% per hour of happiness, I don't know. It's quite random.
So speaking of happiness, pizza makes me really happy.
So, I've got a live update from Joe. Pizza is during 5 minutes. Well, probably 4 minutes now, actually. So I think it's probably time to wrap up. Any last comments?
I think our emotions basically develop from the chaotic life that we experience. And so randomness is actually part of the mechanism behind it.
I think if you want to do, this emotional model, we should proceed in different ways. Like, it's okay with algorithms and those kind of things, but we should also improve collective knowledge between robots and sensors.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any right answer. It's not one we can say right now. So I think absolutely, diversity of approach is definitely the way to go.
I just want to say that we've talked about like 3 different things, like whether the robot is able to understand emotions, or it's able to mimic emotions, and whether it's able to
feel emotions.
Really have those emotions. Yeah, so those are 3 completely different things. It doesn't have to have all of those, but some of those might be involved. Maybe different applications. Yeah.
I think recognizing emotions is probably more well understood. I think
and potentially more easy to apply to applications.
It is also true that some emotions are related to our body. Like I remember that yawning is not like an emotion because I'm feeling something, because we are releasing, I think, oxygen to the brain or something. I don't know. So some emotions are also related to our body, not because it's.
Well, I think, emotions absolutely. I don't think. Let's come back to the long-term mental. I don't think you can you can disassociate you from your body. You are one interrelated entity. Yeah? You can't have the brain in the tank. So I think you're right. Things happening on your body have an effect on your emotion. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I don't think we can get away from that.
Yes, that's true. And so maybe the robots are actually feeling emotions, but not just the same emotion as human beings. So when we were saying that it's like tired when the robots has some trouble with his battery, etc. That's a bit like tired. The robot is a bit like tired, but we say tired because that's something that we can understand and relate to as human beings.
I think
the
robots
robots are different embodiments than human beings, so the robots would feel different emotions than human beings. But maybe they can try to show us what they feel by mimicking human emotions out of their real emotion. I don't know if that makes sense, but just so we can understand that they need to be recharged, but that's okay. The robot is tired. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's yeah. Sorry.
Because indeed, you said we have hormones and so chemical reactions. And the battery is low, it's also a chemical reaction. So, so now what is why chemical reaction?
Okay.
No, it's a question of is the chemical reaction actually the event of the emotion, just the effect of it.
The last comment, I think, Frank said it.
It's not a question, it's just a comment, as you said. Most of the time, emotion goes to love after, and we didn't talk about love. And it's very important.
I actually have some thoughts on that. I might mention it.
It's a TV show, Real Humans. It's very interesting because it starts by emotions, and it goes to love with someone. And so I have no question, I have no answer, but I wanted to put on the table that it's also very interesting because emotion leads to love. And what do you think?
Yeah, people think that if the robot feels emotion, we have feelings with the owner, and so the robot won't leave the owner to a richer owner. Something like that.
Sorry, I said to have a last word, and that word is pizza.